steal the car.
Howdy, howdy. So, from one Riot IP to another. This isn't terribly surprising. League and Runeterra do share a universe after all. I can even remember one of my first games all the way back in 2012. I played Mundo, and I have a very distinct memory of buying a ruby crystal. Good times. Good times. But that's not the story I want to tell you today. No. Today, I want to go even further back in time to when I was in the 4th grade. It's a fun one, so grab your popcorn and get settled in. The year is 2005. I'm 10 years old, and I'm having a perfectly average day. I'm fidgeting in my chair, barely paying any attention to the lesson in session, and it's almost time for recess, my favorite time of the day, of course. But, as is often the case, there's a catch. So, there were enough kids in my class that if we all wanted to play soccer or football, which 90% of the time we did, we needed 4 teams to evenly spread out the players. This meant that we needed 2 fields for all of us to be able to play. Thankfully, our playground had 2 open areas adequate enough to serve as fields of play. Problem solved, right? Well, not exactly. The first field was ideal, for the most part. The field wasn't well maintained, so it was more dirt than grass, but at least there weren't any potholes to trip on. Well, except for the one. But it wasn't very big and it was easy to avoid since we all knew where it was. Notable was the fact that the field was right next to the parking lot, so every once in a while you had to chase a wild ball from underneath a car. But that wasn't terrible. The worst part of it was there was a noticeable decline running perpendicular to the field, so if you were playing soccer, the ball would roll down that decline. But even that wasn't too bad. We were kids. We just adapted. All in all, it was a decent field. It worked. Now, let's talk about the second field. The second field had many advantages over the first. It was flat throughout and grassy. It had a fence on one side and the playground on the other, so wild balls were less often a nuisance. And the field was larger and more rectangular. So, all around, it was simply put, a better field in every single way possible. Except for one small detail. There were 2 metal poles cemented into the ground right smack dab in the middle of the damn field. These 2 10 feet tall, 2-inch wide aluminum poles were more than just eyesores. They impeded upon what would otherwise have been the best field. What's worse is they wouldn't even let us use them for their intended purpose. The previous year, a friend of mine didn't attach the metal latch properly, and he ended up eating that metal latch for lunch. He got hit right in the face. I have to say, though, he took it like a man. After the initial surprise and some crying, he settled down rather quickly, despite the blood running down his face. I was impressed. After that singular incident, they decided to forbid us from playing tetherball at all. Thinking about it now, this was absolutely negligence from the adults. They shouldn't have been letting us kids attach the tetherball in the first place for exactly this reason. And it's pure laziness to ban the activity instead of getting involved to allow the activity to continue safely. Bad form all around, if you ask me. And I'm not just mad because I was great at tetherball and they took that away from me. That doesn't factor into this at all. Not even a little bit. That isn't what's going on. No. Anyways, that's why there's 2 metal poles in the middle of this field. Important to note. Very important. So, the first field, despite its problems, is clearly the better field. But that's unfair. If one field is clearly better than the other field, how do we fairly distribute who plays on each field? Well, we simply rotated who played on which field. One day, Group A would play on Field 1, and then the next day, Group A would play on Field 2. Perhaps this was mediated by the adults, but I never remember the adults ever telling us to do this. I think we came up with the solution on our own, and I'm proud of that. We were smart kids. Well, some of us were smart kids. Some of us were about to make some very poor decisions. And that brings us back to me. Recess had begun, and it's my group's turn to play on field number 2, the field of 2 poles. It seems like just another day on the playground. Nothing is amiss. I don't have any bad feelings or anything. I'm not thinking about anything, really. I'm just playing soccer with my friends. I should have been thinking a little bit harder about those 2 poles, however. One of them, to be specific. We were all running around having a grand old time when my teammate Paul broke away with the ball and made a shot on goal. He missed wide to the left. Damn. Their goalie recovered the ball and kicked it high up into the air. Now, my dad had put me into sports from a very young age, and I learned one of the key tenets of most any sport is to keep your eye on the ball. I had been playing soccer and baseball for many years at that point, so I knew the basics. I kept my eye on the ball as it flew up higher and higher. Their goalie had kicked it well, and it soared, quickly overtaking my current position. If I wanted to have any chance of receiving this ball, I needed to move. So I moved, keeping my eye on the ball the entire time. Now, I was holding true to the tenet of the sport, but I had forgotten one of the key tenets of life. Watch where you're going. The ball was faster than me, and it overtook me. And as it descended, I turned my head around to track it as it fell back down to the earth, and wham! I ran full speed, face first, right into one of the tetherball poles. I have such a vivid memory of this event. It's like it happened just a few days ago. Even the pain is ingrained in my brain as this awful, intense, negative emotion. But at the time, it was even worse. I fell on my ass, put my hands to my face, and screamed bloody murder. The blood ran from my forehead, specifically from my right eyebrow, into my hands and onto the ground. Not sure how long I sat there wailing, but eventually somebody collected me into a wheelchair and wheeled me into the nurse's office. I don't remember much past that point, but I did stop screaming eventually. Unfortunately, my glasses broke. The fortunate part was how they broke. Instead of shattering, the lens simply popped out of the frame and inertly fell to the ground. Thank God my parents had gotten me plastic lenses instead of glass ones. The frame, however, was ruined, mangled in such a manner that it simply wasn't recoverable. I like those glasses too. So it goes. They ended up not giving me stitches. I suppose they just didn't think I needed them. And to this day, I have a small scar on my right eyebrow. I think it's pretty badass, although it's not very noticeable, and I always get a good laugh out of it whenever I tell people the story of how I actually got the scar. I have another scar on my right hand ring finger, but that's another story for another time. And there you have it. I hope you enjoyed listening to that story as much as I enjoyed telling it. It's one of my favorite stories to tell people about myself. If you made it this far, you're a fucking legend, and I hope that your coffee is always the right temperature. Good luck and have fun out there, y'all, and I'll see you in the next vid.